Is the S25 Ultra a ripoff? Is it? That's what I want to talk about in this video because there's a lot of people that are pretty upset about this phone. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone more upset about a Samsung phone, probably ever. I mean, really, probably ever. But I don't think it's ripoff, and I actually really like the one that I have. And there's some amazing deals if you're looking to get one. $900 of trading credit, lots of other cool stuff. I've got an affiliate link in the description if you want one. But the phone itself, why are people so angry? Well, the reason people are so angry is actually only two small reasons. One, because with the S Pen they took away Bluetooth functionality. Now, what did Bluetooth functionality do? Well, it gave us the air commands, it gave us the remote shutter function, it gave us the ability to like wake the screen. There was a couple things in here that have been around for a long time. I think since what? Like the Note 10? Like the Note 10 Plus, I think is whenever those came out, if I remember correctly. So we're going to like 6, 7 years. We've had these nifty little features in the S Pen. And honestly, I don't know that it's so much that the features are gone or just the fact that Samsung took them out. Or it could be both, honestly, because according to Samsung's internal research, and I don't know if this was uh, according to what I've heard from a reputable source, uh, they say that less than 1% of people use those features. I don't know if it was less than 1% use them daily or less than 1% use them. I think it's more than 1% because I've got a lot of people in the comments that are not happy. And I even did a poll, and here, while I'm sitting here talking, I'll look up my poll because they did a poll the other day asking people about it because a lot of people are really upset about it. I'm not particularly upset, but this is a very subjective thing because I don't personally use those features all that much, so it's not hurting my feelings. But I understand that there are people. So here we go. I put this in my community poll. The S25 Ultra S Pen no longer has Bluetooth support. Goodbye remote shutter, air gestures, but do you care? So, 16% of people out of 1,700 clicks, like 1,700 people participated in this, and so far, 16% said it was nice, but I'll live, so not a big deal there. 10% said meh, MEH, is one of my favorite options, and then 27% said I don't care. So that's a whopping total of 52%, no big deal, but 48% of people said I'm not happy. Now that doesn't mean that they're not happy because they're not going to use them or they're not going to happy because they're gone just period, but 48% of people out of 1,700 votes said they're not happy about it. So either Samsung really screwed up on their research or there's a lot of people who are just mad based off principle and they never use them. But either way, that's a fact of reality. Like the feature doesn't exist anymore. And I think people have a right to be upset. Why? Because this phone is called the Ultra. It's not called the Enhanced Edition. It's not called the Plus. It's not called the Above Average. It's not called the Stupendous. It's called the Ultra. So when you have a phone called the Ultra, it's synonymous with the word like extreme. It should be beyond what the norm is, right? And it's okay. We've still got the S Pen, right? The S Pen is still in here, and you can still use it, and it still works fine, and it's still really good, all that great stuff. But that loss of functionality, I think, rubs people the wrong way for three reasons. One, because people did use it more than 1%, maybe. About 50% of people on my poll are unhappy about it. But two is based off principle, and I'm a principle kind of guy. I get mad about things on principle probably more than most because just why? Why did you do that? What was the point? Did you really save that much money? And the S Pen only costs like $30 to replace. So you're still getting the S Pen. Did it really cost that much extra money that Samsung had to go and take it out and screw with people's phone? I mean, did it really save that much money? And then at the end of the day, I mean, it's the Ultra. Like, how do you call the phone the Ultra when arguably you keep taking away features? Like, there's not a whole lot that really this phone stands out other than just being big beyond a lot of other phones nowadays. I mean, the S Pen is really the last defining characteristic that really lets you call it the Ultra. If it didn't have the S Pen, how are you going to call it the Ultra? I mean, it only has 12 gigs of RAM, and that's the other reason people are mad. Now, I think it's fine with 12 gigs of RAM, but the frustration I have moving forward is one, it's called the Ultra. Like, how do you have a phone called the Ultra that there's other phones in the US that have more RAM than it? Like the OnePlus 13 It has 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, there's a 16 gig RAM model. So, yeah, I mean, you take a look at the Pixel 9 Pro series. They all have 16 gigs of RAM. They don't even have a 12 gig. They're all 16 gigs. So, if you've got two other phones of like the 4 or 5 carriers in the US that sell phones that have higher RAM configurations, are you the Ultra? I know I've talked about it from a practical perspective. I mean, really, there's just nobody out there touching 16 gigs of RAM. I used to complain about it years ago when they first started throwing it in there because, like, this is just an arbitrary number. They're throwing this out there. It's a vanity metric because it looks better. But when you call yourself the Ultra, you kind of have to look better. Like, you can't be that guy that shows up in the gym with a bag of donuts and then say, "Yeah, man, I'm training for the strongman. Like, I got the strongman next week, but instead you're Joe Bag of Donuts." I mean, that's me. I'm the donut bag guy. I'm not claiming to be some, Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that's what this phone is claiming to be, right? It's claiming to be the Ultra, and then they do something arbitrary like that, and I call it arbitrary. And the reason I call it arbitrary is because the phone's so expensive. It's more expensive than any other regular phone that's out there, so it kind of defies logic and reason when we already had a price increase last year. And I mean, maybe the economy's worse, maybe it's not. I don't know. Like, I'm not an economist. I'm just a guy that goes down the street and gets pissed off when I got to pay $8 for 18 eggs. All right, prices ain't right. I mean, the price is wrong, Bob. If you ever saw Adam Sandler and Happy Gilmore, which I'm super excited, by the way. Like, a brief moment of levity here. I'm really excited about Happy Gilmore 2 whenever it gets here. That's going to be amazing. But yeah, the price is wrong. So everybody was mad last year, but everybody still bought the phone. And this year, nobody's buying the phone. Like, nobody's buying it. I don't have access to Samsung's internal data, but I have access to my data. And I have access to the results that I see and the affiliate sales that I see come in and the clicks on the links that I have. And they're bad. And quite frankly, if the phone stays on this trajectory, we're going to see articles start popping up probably in the next week, very similar to Apple with the iPhone, where sales were lackluster, or people were returning them, people weren't happy with them. Apple pulled a big one over on people. They sold the same phone, but they promised something they still haven't delivered on yet, which was Apple Intelligence. And everybody for the longest time was the Apple guys, the Apple sheep, the ones that have the blinders on. They sit there and they go, "Oh, our phone's better than your phone. Our phone's better than your phone. Our phone just works." And then it starts having issues. It starts having inconsistencies with iOS and different things like being behind. Like, they're very behind in AI. So then they're like, "All right, guys, Apple Intelligence is coming." So then the Apple sheep, they rally. They're like, "We've got it too, guys." And then it's still not completely here. So it was just ridiculous when you see the advertisements for these phones and like, "Now with Apple Intelligence," and then you get it and it's still not there. Now, we've had two deployments of Apple Intelligence, iOS 18.1 and 18.2, or if you live overseas, iOS 18.1 and .2, whatever. I don't know where we draw the line on that. Like, where do you draw the line, whether you say 18.2 or 18.2? I don't know. I've always just called it a point. But, yeah. And the crazy thing is in a lot of countries, I think it's like the EU and China, you still can't use them. So half the world can't use these features that aren't there yet. So Apple royally screwed up, and they lost, I think, like 5% market share last year. And I said this weeks ago. This was a magical opportunity. This is one of those once every couple year opportunities where Apple screwed up, and people clearly are becoming disenfranchised with them at a certain level. Samsung could have swooped in and said, "You know what? We're going to make the best, most awesomest, ultra-ist phone possible and really, really sell people." And there's some cool new AI stuff. I mean, there's a couple new features now. I love the morning briefing that's on here, the evening briefing, the now. There's some updated stuff with the audio eraser. There's some better generative AI or generative edit. There's better stuff when it comes to sketch to image. There's improvements with the integration with Siri and multimodality and contextual awareness. Like, they're making some steps there. But then you sell a phone that people don't want, and it comes off as looking bad. Now, the phone is good. I've been using this phone for like 5 days now, 4 days now. I really like the phone. I really enjoy it. I think it's really immaterial from a day-to-day performance perspective on the RAM. I mean, 12 is fine. It's going to be fine for years. Now, from when you sell a phone that's good for 7 years, you might run into future proofing issues, but they count on that. Just like Apple, they are like, okay, well, we've got to put 8 gigs in there for Apple Intelligence. They sandbagged it for years, and then they finally come out and like, all right, we got 8. So the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the iPhone 16 are the ones who get Apple Intelligence. They just screwed over generations of their phone users with the next big thing. So Samsung, I was hoping that we would get something a little bit more, I don't know, ultra, right? And there's some nice stuff. Like we updated, we've got 6.9-inch screen instead of a 6.8-inch screen. Very quietly, we've got satellite communication for emergency SOS only with Verizon right now, and that's because they contracted with Skylo. Somebody put it in the comments, I remember yesterday after I made the video. So they left it like a third party, left the carriers to kind of battle it out over support. The phone has enabled support for emergency SOS text messaging, but the problem was instead of going direct with the satellite carriers, Samsung said we'll let the carriers fight it out. So Verizon's the only one currently that is enabled. T-Mobile will probably come online using Starlink, and we'll see if AT&T contracts independently on their own or something. But yeah, I mean, you've got the capability at least for emergency SOS. Everybody was complaining about that, and then it was the sky is falling. People were saying Dex was going to be gone. Dex is still here. Dex is still here on the phone. But really the big things people are mad about are the S Pen and the storage size. And even though there's amazing deals on this, and I know I've said this a few times, but before the phone came out, I said one of two things is going to happen. Either the phone's going to have some cool new feature that makes it exciting, everybody wants to buy it, or it's going to have really good trade-in deals. And it does have the best trade-in deals we've seen in years. $900 of pre-order credit max, and that's for the S24 Ultra, that's for the Z Fold 6 and the Z Fold 5. And I think it's actually particularly good for people with the Z Fold 5 because there's some folks who decided to move over to the Fold and just aren't crazy about it. So you want to come back, that's a good deal. Plus, they've got free Galaxy Buds 3 Pro. You can get the free storage upgrade on the phone, so you can get a 512. You can get the earbuds for free, but don't do that because if you get the 512 model, you would pay $20 and you get the earbuds as opposed to getting the 256 and getting them for free. So you save $20, but then you miss out on the free storage upgrade. But if you want to get them for free and then use the extra credit, you can get free Samsung Galaxy Care. There's a lot of stuff. Again, I've got an affiliate link in the description. Yeah, I think it's a good phone. I really like it. I like the changes of the ergonomics. And if you notice, this is I can't remember the name of the case, but it's Samsung's faux leather case. I like it a lot. Like I've really been enjoying using it, and I got it at Best Buy. It's normally $54. It was on sale for $27. So yeah, I like that. But I like the design changes. It's easier for me to hold. I like the flat sides. I really do appreciate that. The rounded corners, I don't care about as much. I mean, it's neat, but I do prefer the flat sides. A little bit lighter. The cameras do have some improvements. Like they rewrote the algorithm. They enhanced it for taking photography. The photos do seem to be better. And I think that's popping up in different places where you can see that, and it's measurable. You've got the new ultra wide, which also gives you better macro shots. It's supposedly 4 times better nighttime shots and all sorts of different stuff. So, I mean, there are a couple meaningful changes here, but they're dwarfed by people being mad that the storage upgrade no longer offers 16 max. And I mean, if you got the 256 last year anyway, you got 12, and I believe the 512, I think you even got 12. At least somebody was correcting me on that yesterday, but I'm certainly got it with the 16. But here's the other trivial thing. It's available in other markets. So if you go to Korea, I think China, maybe it's just Asia, you can get the 16 gig model. I think it only comes in the 1 terabyte, but you can still get 16 gigs. And what does that tell us? It tells us that consumers in America are stupid. I mean, I'm a consumer in America, but I mean, I get mad about a lot of things. But in the US, they're trying to play the Apple game. Apple doesn't ever talk about specs. Like the phone, it just works. Now, there's been that image is faltered a little bit. I don't think it just works as well as it used to, but everybody relies on that. Apple, it just works. Samsung has been quietly pulling away. If you've been watching their keynotes for the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years, it used to be this big specs, this big specs, this big specs. We talk about processor speed. I mean, they didn't even mention that they've got a 4.47 gigahertz chip, right? They're not talking about the specs. They're talking about AI. They're talking about better battery than ever. They're talking about heatsink. They're talking about software changes. They're not talking about specs. And I think that's because people in the US care less about specs. I think maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's a technology thing, maybe it's a market thing. But I think specs matter more in other areas of the world than the U.S. because in the U.S., I mean, 70% of people are buying an iPhone, and people have been conditioned in the U.S. not to pay attention to specs. So that's why when you have someone like me, yeah, it's frustrating when you take something away like that, even though the performance is still the same, and then it's arbitrary because you're charging me $1,300 for a phone. Like, why'd you take it away, right? You took something away and you charged me the same. It's like shrinkflation. It pisses me off. Like, I go to the grocery store and I'm buying the same soap that I was, but instead of 250, it's $5, and they made it 25% smaller. So I think that's how people feel. And people are very, I think, budget conscious in the US, but I think they don't care as much about the specs. And Samsung is trying to move away from that and emulate Apple so they can just talk about performance. Because when you look on paper, the Snapdragon 8 Elite with 40% improvements in so many different areas looks phenomenal. But nobody's excited about that. Everybody's just paying attention to you get 12 gigs of RAM, which most people had anyway. And the features on the S Pen that Samsung claims less than 1% of people use. So, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to think about there. I don't think it's a ripoff. I think people are upset, and I think that's influencing people's opinions on the phone, even not having used it. I've been using it for about 5 days now. I like it. I like it better than my S24 Ultra. I made a video yesterday saying I'm glad I upgraded. There's stuff here that I like, but I'm going to go back to the same thing I always tell you. Most people shouldn't be upgrading year over year, and a lot of people who are never going to buy the phone are upset anyway, just principally, just to be upset. And that's the American way. I mean, people in the U.S., we like to be upset just to be upset. And I think there's some of that going on, but I think maybe there's something to it, because if you're paying $1,300 for a phone called the Ultra, it's not really that Ultra anymore. We don't have an SD card anymore. We don't have an IR blaster anymore. We don't have S Pen extra features anymore. They keep taking stuff away. And Samsung used to be the most innovative, groundbreaking, pushing the envelope, willing to take risks, and they've turned into like the soccer dad who's putting a helmet on his kid while he plays dodgeball. There's just things that have changed, and Samsung just doesn't have that, I think, pioneer spirit anymore. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I think sales are going to be bad. I think people, rightfully, some are mad, and I get it. And I'm not crazy about it, but it is what it is. It's the phone we have, and it is a good phone, and I really enjoy it. And I think if you want one, you'll probably be really happy with it, and you'll probably see a lot of stuff in the next month or two as we get through this frustration period. As it gets in people's hands, this phone is going to be contending for phone of the year again. I'm predicting that right now. Anyway, so that's all I got. If you have any questions, comments, gripes, concerns, complaints, go to the comment section. I'll do my best to get back with you. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and the subscribe button and a little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. As always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.